Hi, everyone. It's great to be not just on this stage, but also surrounded by wonderful, really gentlemen here that has broader spectrum of practical privacy that you could relate to, from transactional privacy to network level privacy to identity privacy. And today we will roast Web3 or Ethereum privacy. And we have lots of hot takes on the state of the privacy here and there. And I want to kind of, again, go through a short introduction circle, but try to answer through the lens of who you are and why you're here for the privacy specifically.
So I guess to start, my name is Emil. I am a core developer on Railgun. If you don't know Railgun, it's a privacy system on Ethereum. It's been deployed for 3 years and has done like $3.2 billion in transaction volume for that time, so it's very much usable today. There's a couple of wallets out there. If you want to try one of them, you can come and scan my hand after. I have a bionic chip that will give you a link directly to the railway wallet. Yeah, that's it for me, I think.
Siusko?
Hey, so I'm Siusko. I'm a network technical lead at NIM. NIM is working on privacy on the network layer of things. Why am I here? Well, first of all, because Mykola invited me. But I guess Mykola invited me for a reason. And the reason is because at NIM we believe that internet is inherently broken, and therefore we need to figure out how to restore privacy and security for people by default. And when we talk about Ethereum, whatever comes on the level of transactions or different rollups on top of that, we still have to remember that the underlying layer, which is the internet itself, is not private and is not built to be private or protect users from using. And that's something which we work on, not particularly for Ethereum itself, but we can make integration for Ethereum as well.
Hey everyone, I'm Mario, and I'm from Ethereum Foundation's protocol supporting, so generally I work on the core protocol, but I'm privacy enthusiast. I believe that privacy is important human right that we need to exercise and protect, so that's why I'm here today. I love privacy tools and free software in general, so yeah, also Ethereum from the privacy perspective, but there is not much of it. We will get there, yeah.
Lasha?
Hello everyone, I'm Lasha from Rarimo, and of course we figured out that like privacy-based transactions and your actions make sense, but what we're exploring is like when you are private, what does it enable, and what does you being private but verifiable, your identity, your certain attributes can enable, and what are the values or the use cases we can unlock. That's what we're building.
Yeah, perfect. So we skip the moment why people need privacy, because too many times we're here at the stake. I would go through, but what's the state of so-called Web3 privacy? How you would measure the temperature, where we are?
Yeah, well, I guess I mentioned a few numbers for Railgun. I don't actually know a lot about privacy on Ethereum. I come from the peer-to-peer networking side, the cryptography of that. And kind of fell into Railgun because of that background. But like I said, from the inside, it seems like we are doing pretty well. And we have Vitalik shilling Railgun at every opportunity he gets. But it's very usable today. We are currently working on making it much easier to use from a development perspective. It's not very easy to integrate Railgun at the moment, which I think is really important. Not that Railgun is the perfect system, but it's the system that works today.
Siusko, where we are. And we are not talking here only about Ethereum privacy. We will get to that point but so-called decentralized privacy.
So I think this is an interesting question because I don't follow Ethereum that closely anymore neither. However, if you look on how it's made, it's based on a solarpunk values of a complete transparency, radical transparency, and that is antithesis to privacy by default. Interesting point in that, I think, is that we cannot judge privacy simply from a technical point of view. The tech is one part, another part is the culture. So I'm happy to be seeing that the culture has been shifting on Web3, in particular on Ethereum, slowly. Now we need to catch up with the tech. But looking on what happened with Tornado Cash, looking on what Fern closing down for similar reasons, and other protocols like that, I wouldn't be too optimistic on a privacy just yet, because I think it would be fooling ourselves. However, if we figure out, or maybe if we admit ourselves that that is a problem and we culturally shift, and we all here can be part of that shift, and therefore, based on that agreement and the culture start to build the tools which are needed, things can change. However, it's quite difficult for Ethereum because of the very default and underlying kind of ground on which it's based. So privacy Ethereum, I'm not sure if I'm that bullish, but I'm happy to be sitting among people who know much more than myself and who are enthusiasts towards the direction. What, as I already said, what we are up to at NIM is the network under, and the layer under, and that is the network layer, right? And that's something which, even if we figure out transaction privacy, what have you, we still have to be looking into that, and that's something we can talk about technically. But for that, again, the culture needs to change. So let's figure out how we can change the culture first of all.
So the state of the privacy, right? Well, I think it's not impossible to be private, which is a good start. But it's far from ideal. So like in Web3 or in Ethereum in general, I like what Siusko said. Because I'm also noticing this sort of culture shift, or more people talking about privacy finally, right? Realizing that the transparency only takes you so far. But what I'm worried about is that it's sort of LARPing, it's sort of like signaling, right? Like we talk about privacy, but we don't exercise it. We talk about that our project is private, but it's only caring, so also like this panel, right? Privacy is a complex topic. It's an end-to-end thing. So there is the wallet, there is the network layer, there is the on-chain layer of the transactions that need to be private. So there is many parts to it. And what makes me worried is that we focus only on certain parts, or there are projects that only talk about certain parts of it, but completely miss the whole point that, like, you are using iPhone or Google device anyway. Like you don't have any privacy on the base layer, or the internet itself, the networks, the phone network, which isn't built with any privacy in mind. So we need to be humble. We need to have some pragmatic approach to the privacy. Take the current state, which is not ideal at the face value, but we also need to realize that it's just tip of the iceberg, and there is many other layers that we need to not necessarily fix, but find the solutions and use them in a certain way to be private. Yeah, hope it makes sense.
Lasha, where we are?
Okay. It depends like what we're gonna like zoom out. What is our perspective, right? If we just like saying the state of privacy in the crypto world, I mean, look at us, like we're doing okay, right? Now we have our own panels, main stages. 2 years ago, we would have like a separate rule somewhere there. So yeah, definitely like this ZK, zero knowledge, all that stuff, apart from like scaling, found its way into the privacy, and I would say we're doing okay. But if we zoom out to an industry and the kind of real world, what is happening, and especially in AI, and I've been doing a lot of like research. Actually, I was trying to measure like how frequent are the Google searches or like this kind of AI related content that mentions privacy or something called like verifiable AI. And I'm gonna say like, we're fucked. Because like there's like very low mention of it, and we need to understand that like apart from like our cocoon, and I don't mean it in a wrong way, but whatever's happening outside of it, it's a bit of a like a losing battle. So that I'm a bit worried with the state of privacy and the amount of the attention it gets outside of our world.
I just can confirm it because I came from the event in Brazil called Crypto Rave, where crypto stands for cryptography, and there's almost no Web3. Apart from one dev shop from Argentina who were talking about ZK, trying to obfuscate crypto stuff, as in finances, while they also fundraise in Bitcoin, for example, for the event. So they're not necessarily anti-crypto, but still they're saying that there's no freedom without privacy, and cryptography is the one enabling it. well, in this industry, it's a bit sort of sketchy, this narrative. But I love your take, Mario, on privacy, that it's a complex phenomenon. We in Web3 privacy now call it as a stack, because, I mean, stack is one way to approach it, but it's the ecosystem of multiple services and the cultures and projects. And I would like each of you define how privacy stack would look like, or how you would like it to be like, what should be on chain, what should not, to kind of like share that complexity with others.
First, I just had a thought that you mentioned about how technologies like Tornado Cash and Fern were basically shut down, or like, you know, nobody wanted to use Tornado Cash for a long time, because if you associated with it, by default, unless you could prove otherwise, your funds were also under OFAC sanctions. I think at Railgun we've had a very different experience from regulators. Earlier today there was a talk from EF as well about how big institutions are a bit hesitant to integrate with stablecoins because they lack privacy, or the fact that their customers, if they were to use stablecoins on-chain, would lose the privacy they normally enjoy from the traditional banking network. So what we've seen with in Railgun is that the regulators actually like it a lot, even though it's completely anonymous what happens inside the system. And the reason they like it is because we also have this system on top called private proofs of innocence, where without revealing what you're doing or who you're interacting with, you can still prove that your source of funds, like ultimately where did the money come from, is not on any sanction list, was not involved in any hacks or any crime. So just to clear up the misconception that the big government is always against privacy is not entirely true. And now I forgot your question.
The stack, the complexity behind the...
But I think this is an interesting discussion as well, by the way.
Yeah.
I like it, yeah.
It's just, I think it's just adds a bit of nuance, because at least I like, also before I joined Railgun, I'd like to think that, you know, with everything that goes on in regulation about, you know, introducing backdoors and chat control and all that stuff, that the government is always out to get us. And that might be true with chat control, but it was just something that I found counterintuitive when it came to the financial side of things, where it's not actually always in the big government's interest to have everything in the clear on-chain, or at least for the big institutions like the banks, it's not in their interest to reveal everything their customers are doing.
Just adding here, there will be lots of L2s that will really channel the privacy states to corporations, even within Ethereum. You would see it in the next years. And there are some organizations searching for high-scale privacy dev focused on ZK to generally serve institutional players. And there will be a sort of dichotomy, B2B versus B2 human privacy, which is interesting that they're sort of counterintuitive, but a part of one ecosystem. Siusko, getting back to the stack question, since you work on the infrastructural layer, try to map this kind of like complexity behind the privacy as a spectrum or a stack. How you would, what kind of elements you would put there on the table?
Sorry, I was still stuck a little bit on these things, what he was saying. I had like a lot of thoughts in my head about it. Because I think it can spur interesting discussion, but we can table it for later. On the privacy stack, you mean to do this kind of thing which you have on Web3 privacy webpage, like what I use for chatting and for emailing and for network and these type of things?
But just sort of like, you're meeting someone who never used any privacy tool, and you want to explain the complexity that one Monero doesn't fix everything, one private Proton drive doesn't fix and provide 100% of privacy.
Yeah, so I wouldn't usually try to like just meet somebody and preach about privacy, right?
I would.
You would, and that's like actually connects to the thoughts I have around this topic here. But sometimes, again, it's cultural. It can be very simple. Somebody's like, I wanna, you know, we can do some sort of basic exchange for, I don't know, like we're gonna go there, I'm gonna pay hotel for 2 days and you're gonna pay me what's your PayPal or something. As simple as that. And again, it can come like, oh, you can start to be evangelical around Monero and these type of things. But sometimes even the fact to like bring things back to cash, you know, and I'm not here proposing that a cash is is the shit. But I'm just like saying that the mindset is, again, beyond the tech and beyond the primitives we have, because they might not always fit, right? If you do some one-timer with somebody, then it's gonna be different than if somebody's really interested, or if you work organized with somebody, if you do events with somebody more often, then it's a whole different thing, because then it's like the culture you're setting up. Are we gonna be using everything Google just because it's accessible and it's simple and it's so great made for bigger organizations, which, by the way, it's not. A lot of those things suck. Or are we gonna take that step a little bit farther away, and are we gonna be thinking about what can be the alternatives? And again, that is a very cultural thing, because it's not that the applications which are offered on top of your application store or something are the best. In fact, nowadays, a lot of devs is gonna be let go, and that's because they're gonna be exchanged, or they are already getting exchanged by prompt managers. And the applications already, most of the time, suck. It's just a terrible crap, really. But it's gonna get even worse, because you're gonna get prompt from an AI, you're gonna deploy that, you're gonna put it out, and there'll be maybe a few devs who can review that. But like the time and the competition in how the society and how the market works will be pushing you into releasing faster and even worse crap than what's been existing now. The problem of this is, what type of users does this create? I remember using Tails since ever, because I love the privacy behind it. Was I able to do a lot of the stuff on Tails, or did I really understand a lot of the things? Not really, but I knew that, okay, there is some hack labs or some people who've been around who are deeper in those things. And then, yes, it's based on trust, but I rather gonna trust some of these people in the beginning and learn from them and find the resources where I can be learning, than to trust whoever gave me the application in the first place because it was on a Play Store or something. And then with that, you sometimes go a little bit of a steeper way, and then setting up an organization, setting up a business or what have you, association, it might take you a little bit more time. Sometimes things might not be having a solution right away built for your special case, but once you put that effort, and I think that's the important part, and you put a cultural shift, that's when you're really also changing the mind of people and showing them that it makes sense. And just like with everything, maybe it wasn't the easiest in the beginning, because it's not this like, oh, one button, everything works, which yet again, it doesn't. But then people start to realize the beauty not only of privacy, but also of the fact that the Unix and Linux-based systems are all of a sudden, you own much more of choices, how you're gonna compose things, so it's beyond privacy. I'll stop here so others can talk, and maybe you can talk about something more particular, but I think it's to not limit ourselves also only to privacy, but how that relates to another aspect of life and of relating to each other.
Yeah, I very much resonate with that. And yeah, I was already thinking about the discussion before, but yeah, about the stack. What I would say in general is use free software. Please do. I think the core of everything that we've built here today is in free software. Now, if you're not familiar with this, they also call like open source software. It's a bit different thing. Open source is the pragmatic name for it, but the values or the definition itself is that software needs to be free. Free as in Libre, right? Free as in liberty, as in freedom software. So that's what I would recommend people to use, because, well, privacy comes with freedom, right? And basically we have two kinds of software. The extractive proprietary software that's there to monetize you, to get your data. It's literally their goal. It's the point of the thing. That's why it's been built, to advertise, to collect your data, because you are the product there, or you are paying for it, and you are getting the same sort of service you would get in some free software alternative. And because it comes free as in freedom, I believe that just fundamentally any free software will be respecting your privacy, will be much better for security, auditability, of course. And again, I believe it's the core of all of these cypherpunk values that we try to preach here. But also what Siusko said, it's sort of a trade-off. Yeah. maybe you lose some nice UX, but it's not because it's worse. I don't think that it's inherently worse. I think it's a different paradigm. Again, it was kind of said here, but when you start using the free software alternatives, and first they seem weird, it's a different layout than you are used to or whatnot, but then you really start understanding that there are certain design patterns, there are certain, it's a paradigm shift. It's like crypto, right? Like people say cryptocurrency in this case, right, gives you freedom. Oh, but it's complicated to use. Like, what is the freedom? I just have my bank account. It's simple. But if you understand it's a different paradigm, you have this blockchain thing. It works different than the banks. You get used to it. You know how to use it much better when you realize, oh, there is some block time and slot time and everything. So when you actually start using these things, first it might be driving a car. It takes a while to get used to it, but eventually you will recognize how much more usable it is because it gives you much more freedom in the user space, much more customization to your personal needs. You don't need to listen to a corporation that's somehow using this or controlling the software or your hardware. And again, so the government was said here. I think the government is the big enemy here. I'm an anarchist. I don't like anything that the government comes with. But as well, we live in the age of the corporate surveillance capitalism, right? Like all of these tools, like the government being able to attack us is through these hands of all the companies that use the proprietary software with all these backdoors that you have in your pocket right now, right? And I'm not willing to compromise on this. Everybody can use free software. I want to have free hardware. I want to have fully open source hardware with all the schematics, everything. That's my ideal goal. I try to push the overthrow window to that way, but I think you shouldn't compromise. You shouldn't be worried to take the step there to use free and open source operating system like GNU Linux or whatever, or ditch the iOS for like AOSP, like graphene forks and so on. Take the step and you will feel the freedom. It feels great. It's the same sort of shift I would compare to like first using cryptocurrency and feeling that. Yeah.
Do you remember the original question?
No, I'm like lost. But I guess like I need to preach privacy, right? Something like that.
As a stack maybe, or a complex vision behind it?
Yeah, like as a stack from like development, like I'm a bit confused as well, because from a development perspective in the blockchain, right, we have this kind of stacks of privacy that we need to apply at a wallet level, at a like computational level, at a protocol level, at a network level, and these all like shield you from different activities being traced, etc., etc. On a kind of a human level, of a person who does not understand, it's a kind of privacy starter pack would be like being able to message someone without being traced if you're in trouble, being able to buy some stuff with the means of exchange without being able to be traced or detected or like blocked or taken away. And third one, being able to, what else? Talk to someone, exchange, buy stuff, and have a right to erase everything that you've done and left the trail. That's it. That's like principles, I guess.
I want to highlight that here, small summary, privacy makes money, it's a liberation tool, it's a culture, but also the way a person sees privacy versus the technicality behind it are two different or usually opposite demands. And here, many of you are building or were building privacy tooling, so you know how the tools works from inside. What were the key challenges that you've seen on delivering on-chain privacy solutions?
Well, I guess from my perspective, it probably ties into actually the question you had just before about the stack, because one thing is to deliver on-chain privacy, as in I'm able to conceal the amounts I'm transferring and who I'm transferring to, but that's just one part of it, because you also need to talk to the blockchain, and not very many people run a Ethereum node at home, so you often end up needing to use RPCs to some degree. And what are these RPCs doing with your messages? are they monitoring you? Or, you can go through all these hoops of like, first level, of course, is conceal. What are you talking about? Like, that will hopefully be solved when we get light clients back into Ethereum, so that you don't need to reveal exactly what it is that you're querying. The next part is then, often people also want to hide the IP address, because their IP address is, the digital posted address, so who is talking from where. And you can go on, and that's kind of the, in Railgun at the moment. So I said Railgun has been live for 3 years, and we have this SDK, and there's been a couple of kind of apps built in the open. There's 2 wallets and a shielding website. But in 3 years, that's all that's been done. And what we realized is that it's really hard to use the technology. Not from an end user perspective, it's easy to use the mobile apps and all that, but it's very hard for developers to build on top of this technology. And I know I sound like a shill because I keep saying Railgun, but it's there's no for-profit company behind Railgun. There is a token that is used to incentivize people to help govern the thing, but I'm paid on grants from a foundation. So there's no incentive for Railgun to make money. It's a public goods project. And so basically what we're doing now is rewriting the SDK, and in doing that also revisiting like all the decisions where data or queries leave your device to be able to transact with Railgun, and figuring out how can we obfuscate that even more, how can we leak as little metadata as possible. And that's always the difficult process in how can you, one, leak as little metadata as possible, but also be efficient.
Talking about metadata, Siusko.
We are working on the P2P transportation layer in Rust, so let's figure out integration there after the talk. No, we need to revamp SDKs. That's been actually one of the challenges. I'm not in them since the beginning, a bit over 2 years, and I'll take it from the bias where I'm working with, and that is, maybe I'll take a step back. We are not blockchain privacy, right? NIM is a mixnet. What does that mean is that you have various nodes, and those nodes are sending and mixing traffic, whatever type of traffic from, IP traffic or SOX 5 type of TCP traffic, what have you, and it's mixing it so you can't de-anonymize the source with the outcome of that, simple as. And that is run not by us as NIM, that is run by people who administrate these nodes. We call them NIM operators. And that means that it's decentralized. Why is that so? Is that if you come to us with whatever threat or whatever offer, we are not able to give you any of the traffic information from the mixnet itself because we don't run that infrastructure. So it's a key part, it's a key logic of a system to defend that against trust exposure model of attack. Because whoever tells you, they never gonna give any of your data, people do have their price, people do have their Achilles heel, and eventually they will. So if you build it by default, by default you can only verify not trust to a project, that's whole another level. So I think for us one of the biggest problem is actually this decentralization. It's a solution, but it's also, for me at my work, it's a problem because you need to bootstrap that. We have incentives, the operators make rewards. For that, you need the blockchain part, your little token. We are on Cosmos. There are smart contracts checking how much the nodes are working, and in the end of some time, each node which is doing some work is gonna get some rewards, simple as. So we actually utilize the blockchain, utilize the token for incentivizing the decentralization. But then that brings a whole bunch of problems because you gotta create the incentives very well. But then you're gonna be also therefore exposed to market speculation. But you're gonna bootstrap this network through some investments, but then as you know, the speculation will get you up and down, and not always it's in your favor. So actually, true decentralization of a network is difficult. It's something we've been working with since the very beginning, because this is not new. NIM is very based on the fact that the infrastructure has never been run by the company, or by the organization, but it always had been something which is not fully solved, and it's like evolving type of organism. And it's also beautiful, but it's also, you kind of have a rock on top of like, or first you're rolling the rock against like uphill, and you can never stop because otherwise it will roll against you. And if you feel like you go to some stable place, then it's on kind of like, you know, on top of a kind of like a peak, and you have to hold it and like balance it constantly because you have to figure out the size of the mixed net, you have to figure out the social mood in between those operators who run that, the incentives, and all these things kind of wrap them together and deploy the mixed net on that. And then if you have any vulnerability, any upgrades, it's not like you push a button and you just update everything. No, you gotta talk to all of these people and be like, oh, we gotta change that, this is how we're gonna do that. So, of course, I'm biased because that's my work, but I think that's actually a challenge on truly decentralization of a project.
Yeah, our side kind of wasn't sure what the question was. The
question was like, Lasha, maybe you can start first. Key challenges on delivering privacy solutions that you've seen and seen these days.
There are definitely technical challenges and limitations, but I'm optimistic about it because like overall we're progressing, we're like, I don't know, proof sizes shrink, we're able to like use better devices, decentralize, provide this ownership, optimize proofs. Everything is working nicely and we're like progressing, and I really love the phase. Sometimes like we look up ourselves in the office and like people come out and tell me like, oh, we need like maybe like 2 years to do it, and then in 6 months we've solved certain things, and that like is very promising from a technical perspective. So I would not say there are challenges, but solvable. The biggest challenge for me is like, outside of this room, how do we make people believe and use all those tools that we create? That's the biggest challenge. Because like, apart from all these like technological, mathematical equations and stuff, trust building with the regular public has a different mechanics. Like, we can talk to each other, we can like exchange some like these words and stuff and build trust between each other, but outside of that, it's super hard. And unfortunately, like starting from transactions, right? And then you need this kind of privacy from a transaction to any other use cases. Having the momentum to take those products at a public level outside of the crypto into these kind of normal use cases and making them kind of seamless, that's the biggest challenge. And once again, I might be the most worried person here because of AI, but I definitely feel that it's gonna become even more challenging because these things, they're like hyper convenient. Like you might not like Google, but the way they're integrated everything and now flows into like one single prompt that can like orchestrate all your different applications. And then the rest of the, even like the traditional Web2, where you have this kind of, at least like federated feel, you know, like you can switch from one email to another, from one application to another, you can search things here, go into another search, and more or less you have this kind of federated perception of like putting your identity or your traces in different paths. But the world now that is coming, it just ruins this model. It's like absorbs everything and puts you out into a single interface. And it's going to become more and more challenging of placing privacy and all this like ownership versus the convenience and efficiency of AI. So that's what
Mario, I will specify for you because there's a lot of buzz around privacy within EF or Ethereum in generally. Especially, I've been right now in ETH Dublin, and Vitalik said that privacy should be by default in the governance through protocols like Macy. But I've been looking for Macy for several years, watched how they went through hackathon implementations, experimentation, different optimism proposals, stuff like that, and it took years and years and years of work, and we're not there. Or the Vitalik is saying again that there will be privacy in wallets. Again, what does this mean years from now? I would ask you to kind of zoom out and tell about organizational challenges or like network level challenges that you've seen within Ethereum on delivery, at least simple privacy, as it's called.
Yeah, I mean, okay, thanks for specifying so much. As was said here, like Ethereum is transparent by default, right? That's the sort of solarpunk approach. We have this global state model. So fundamentally in the protocol, it's not easy to implement privacy. I mean, the solutions doing it right now, I mean, they're doing a great job, but it's far from the ideal state of like, I don't know, Monero or something, right? So what we discussed today, and actually Vitalik's roadmap to privacy, I think it has two parts, right? Like the more pragmatic short-term stuff, and then more like long-term changes in the protocol. So if I should unzoom, like yeah, it's hard. Like there are a couple of proposals that I can see happening, like the ZK wormholes on the protocol level. There is new wave of support for that, but generally, like yeah, also like organizational level, like. It felt like, or like a bunch of this stuff was moving so slow. Again, and I felt it here as well. Like there are some technical challenges for sure, the networking stuff and so on. Like it's definitely challenging from this perspective, but just delivering the products because it's a complex challenge, and then at the same time, people are kind of scared to invest in it. Like for example, less from EF perspective, but like some projects that are building privacy products after Tornado Cash, the VCs or whatever investors were much less interested, right? So that's slowed down a lot. And from the Ethereum perspective, I think what I'm hoping for is a future where we can, as we slowly upgrade the design of the protocol, we can add more stuff or just generally switch to a paradigm where we also utilize snarkification of the chain, right? That's a big topic, the beam chain, and that we, in the future, we could scale Ethereum so much thanks to validators not validating the whole block, but just a proof of some ZK proof of the block. And in this case, we talk about scaling, right? But it might as well be used for privacy, right? The validator doesn't have to know what they are validating, just have the proof of whatever happened is correct, right? So from a long-term vision, this is something I hope might happen. But yeah, organizationally, it's not easy to deliver these complex things. Like Aztec, I think, is a great example, and because they are doing a great job, they are very strong on their technology. But to make it, mainnet ready, that needs some time to cook. Yeah, and. From my core development perspective of seeing this happening on Ethereum, I can understand why. Because, so first of all, there is a coordination level. Just agreeing on something that most of the people want, but not all of them, right? Already get stuck. And then implementation, which really needs to work. At a protocol level, like for all these different implementations and all the software to be in sync, to just work correctly with tiny difference in specification, you will end up with errors, and you cannot have that on a network which holds people's money, right? So that's, especially in crypto, I think this is more challenging, that it's harder to experiment. You do some privacy app, you put it on F-Droid, anybody can just try it out, it's beta, whatever. You cannot do it on Ethereum mainnet. I mean, people did, and we lost money already. So, generally, I think it's the general complexity of the privacy combined with the issues with the crypto being so sensitive, and so again, one more thing from the protocol perspective, what definitely people agree on, and what is kind of a prerequisite to the privacy is censorship resistance. Right now on Ethereum, we have very centralized block building, which theoretically could censor transactions that are whatever, privacy tools and so on. So to be able to enforce these transactions, we have proposals like fossil inclusion lists that can enforce the inclusion of some transactions. So that would be the first step to at least have a proper censorship resistance, better than many other networks, by the way, if we manage to achieve this. So yeah, it's a roadmap with a bunch of steps.
Sirenko mentioned culture, and we've seen some cultural upbringings around Ethereum from cypherpunk perspective, and it's interesting that the first year when Vitalik wrote the blog, Make Ethereum Cypherpunk Again, I was checking Denver talks, and there was only one mentioning cypherpunk from Peter van Valkenburg from Coin Center, kind of like corresponding to what preacher is saying, while others were, I guess, were puzzled because they're not into the ethos. And now we're in a situation that more and more people sort of like creating this echo chamber of what cypherpunk is, or it should be rebooted, should be burned out, the old story, build a new creation story. What you're thinking about, like, what kind of cypherpunk values can this culture support and should go forward with?
So, I think I said before, my background was not... for a very long time, I was one of those people that says crypto means cryptology, not cryptocurrency, because I thought cryptocurrency was dirty. And I was ashamed that I was working with Bitfinex at the time. So I came from the peer-to-peer technology, and it was all about, freedom, giving people back the power, showing that peer-to-peer technology can be even more powerful than the centralized technologies that we all enjoy today. And the problem is just that the tools are not readily available like they are for centralized technologies. It's very easy to build a web server and put up a guest book, but make it peer-to-peer, and suddenly you will be at a loss. So I grew up with the cyberpunk ideals. Always privacy, always local first. You don't need to share anything with anybody you don't know. And I was kind of a little bit dismayed when I came into the blockchain world because, yes, a lot of those ideals were there for Bitcoin. Bitcoin was just kind of a bit too early. It was lacking some of the technology, like zero-knowledge proofs have been around since the middle of the 90s, but they have only really matured in the last, 10 years or so. While Ethereum kind of felt a little bit more financialized than it was about the cyberpunk ideals. So now I'm excited about kind of that we are rediscovering these cyberpunk ideals, and just like Vitalik writes in his roadmap to privacy, it's one of these things where you don't really care about it until you do, and then when you start caring about it, it's too late because you can't take back what has already been revealed. And I feel some of the same was kind of said over here. Again, drawing on my experience from Railgun, of course it's expensive, or it's more expensive to send a transaction on Railgun than it is to send it in just plain Ethereum. And also from a technical perspective, Railgun is less capable, like there's no smart contracting engine. We have ways where you can still interact with smart contracts, but it's not as smooth as just writing a contract and start interacting with it. So that kind of also ties into this narrative about, privacy as it is currently feels more expensive than just using the free centralized stuff, but at the expense that you pay the price later. You don't know when you pay the price or what it's going to be. And I think one of the points I liked from Vitalik's blog post was the kind of the optimism we had in the 2000s, where suddenly it felt like the world was getting more open and freer, and like the gays and the geeks didn't have to hide in the closet anymore because we were walking into a world where everyone was going to be accepted. But as he said in the blog post, it feels like the opposite has happened. So now more than ever, it feels like privacy matters a lot.
When I read that paper, the privacy roadmap, and Vitalik is very ideological, right? So I read it and I was like, man, it's like a resistance paper. It's like, that's how the resistance should look like if we have all this like tooling and entire like environment working, and that was my feel, so.
But so did the original cyberpunk ideals. It felt like, the resistance from Star Wars or something. Like, this all seemed completely crazy, but then as the world unraveled over the next, 20 years, it turned out that all the things that seemed crazy then no longer were so crazy, with 5 eyes and the need to everyone being able to encrypt their messages.
Mario, I know that you're skeptical how people bounce and play and overuse the cypherpunk wording. Can you, and I really love your rant about Ethereum devs calling themselves hackers, expropriating the word hackers and kind of like, can you debunk like what specifically you don't like how people approach cypherpunk ethos or narrative these days?
Yeah, I have a whole talk about it on Thursday, by the way. Contemporary cypherpunk communities, like discussing exactly this. Yeah, also, it was said here, I grew up as cypherpunk as well. I grew up in a hackerspace. When I was like 15, I came to this place, which was people like crypto-anarchists and cypherpunks talking about this and this thing. And the thing, like, the problem is that the cryptocurrency is like one piece of it, right? It's definitely like very visible and successful thing that came out from some part of the cypherpunk culture, but talking about cypherpunk, we need to be more humble, and we need to realize that we are not it. We are just some part of it. And yeah, and I mentioned it before, I don't like when people say it in the context of, I don't know, LARPing or what is it, signaling, right? Like, maybe it was after Vitalik's blog, maybe it was already before, but people really started like to use that word, and now everything became cypherpunk, right? And same thing, like you have products or you have some whatever ideas that people like to label something, but it doesn't really represent the core value, or they do it to sound cool. It became the thing, right? Like that's generally the evolution of a subculture. First, they are the people who invent the thing, then the public comes, and then the influencers, the sociopaths, who are extracting the value from the members of public because they act like they really understand it, but they're not the geeks, they're not the creators, they are abusing the sort of the trend, the brand, the cool sounding word of cypherpunk, right? And while there are like these like retina scanning, iPhone using, whatever, Google shilling investors, right? Like that's not cypherpunk. It was never about investments and money, and like again, like I'm not expert on this. I'm too young to remember any of that. I had a pleasure to meet some of the people from the original cypherpunk movement, but I think that today we are in a different generation as well. That the window or the stuff, the topics that were important at the time moved a lot, and also like the issues that we need to care about. But yeah, I think that people in crypto just need to be more humble. Like you building on Ethereum or whatever, it doesn't automatically, allow you to somehow like abuse this word, like label everything like we need to be this. So it's kind of losing its meaning, right? Like if everything is gonna be cypherpunk, nothing is cypherpunk. We need to sort of take the step back and figure out like, okay, but you shill me this thing and you say it's for freedom and for this, but to be able to use it, I need to go through these hoops and KYC or something, right? And I don't want to tell you like what is cypherpunk. I don't want to tell you like how to be, like you need to, I mean, I love to tell you what operating system to use and whatnot for sure, but I don't want to say that this is only thing cypherpunk, nothing else. So I think there are these two extremes, like everything or nothing, and just don't overuse the word. Just like use your own imagination, use your own ways to describe the thing, right? I mean, I don't want everything to be, because then people also will hate us, like people outside of crypto. When you go to some hacker conference where they are actually, again, like real cypherpunk, they're building kind of cool tools, privacy tools, but nothing to do with cryptocurrency, right? And I tell them I work in cryptocurrency, well, but I sound like a scammer, right? Especially when I abuse something that's coming from their culture and I use it so much to describe my work when they don't necessarily see it as that. So yeah, that's my experience. Yeah.
Siusko, I hope you won't do an echo chamber with Mario, repeating his words, but maybe I would specify to you, once you're meeting younger person interested in the culture, how you would kind of like share. What would you share? Where should persons start within the cypherpunk journey? Because not everyone is Assange, Snowden, and stuff like that.
I don't know that, to be honest, because I wouldn't really onboard people in cypherpunk. So I'll actually not echo chamber with Mario while we are, friends in struggle in a way. I have a bit different background and a bit different take. Interestingly enough, we met in Barcelona many years ago as for the first time, I think, and that was my first ETH conference. I was before first time in Parallel Polis and these type of things. But I come from the river of revolutionary tradition. And then I know Rachel O'Leary bringing all the stuff about lunar punk and talking about it. I'm like, wow, that's a different narrative, but it resonates with a lot of the things which people struggling for freedom have been experiencing and talking about. And then another friend, Antadze, is very enthusiastic about crypto, obviously, and bring us with other friends to bigger event in Barcelona. It's my first big, it's this big ETH kind of conference. And I come there full of expectation, how is that gonna be? And I'm watching these talks one by one, especially I picked the more political one, the more social solving issues. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, this, and people, big statements, big clappings, and I'm like, this is about a depth of my school work in 4th grade. What are we clapping here about? And then I look around and then everyone's shilling something, selling something. The relation between the people felt really shallow. And I was disappointed. I was like, wow, if this is, if this is it, which is not, I was like, well, then I figure out, thankfully, also there is not one cryptocurrency type of world, and there is, all these things. So I actually came from another tradition into that than to be I'm not gonna be pretending now to be OG cypherpunk for many years and following these things. There was a lot of the toolings and a lot of the culture which I think I went through without knowing that there is a whole subculture around it, interestingly enough, but I don't come from the tradition. Now, when we talk about narrative, a lot depends on what the goal where we're heading is about. And this might be controversial, but I'm not here actually because of I think we should per se as an end goal fight for privacy. Back then when I was talking about this ETH conference, everything was about decentralization. I would just talk about how that's a big challenge and it's important. But I don't fight here for decentralization per se. In fact, I don't really care as a primary thing if things are freedom of speech or not, or if they're open software or not. Why? Because what inherently is for me working in tech and working with people, communities being interested in that tech, is that liberatory technology and communities we are creating for free life. That means, are we creating opportunities for enlarging autonomy for people and enabling them to defend that autonomy, to define communities the way how they want to live their life? And under that, privacy, decentralization, and all these other aspects fall. But as long as we're going to be talking about each of those as an end goal, we're going to be in a big trouble. Because, yet again, you have all this one-click, one-prompt type of solution, and then you're like, but there's privacy. If I don't make anyone understand what pile of shit we're getting ourselves into if this is going to replace our culture, our human relation, and the way how we live in this world in the first place, and just be talking about privacy, I'll fail. But if we are able to actually offer an alternative to what autonomy, what decisions which we create among ourselves, where people can dream about a world which look differently, and have tools and means to defend those, be that digitally, be that economically, be that in other ways, then of course we have also a great narrative and great use of privacy as by itself also very complex means and set of tools and ways of relating to each other.
Lasha, since you're coming from Ukraine and revolution is not that uncommon word, is cypherpunk narrative a revolutionary for you within Ethereum?
I guess it's not just a revolution, it's a kind of way of looking at things and the world. And I think first time I interacted with the cyberpunk was actually in this city when the opening of Parallel Nipolis, and they were that was quite a good 2016 or something. So primarily that was kind of Bitcoin driven and cryptography stuff. And I felt I kind of feel that way about everything. So that was my click. So I didn't go into these kind of charters and looking into who's done what. Only afterwards I started researching, but it felt very natural to me. I think the same ethos is right now. So the world is evolving. We have different threats coming up, right? And I don't know what your impressions are. Maybe but I feel that world is getting into a much worse place than it was in 80s. Because 80s you had this kind of a liberation movement, like democracy and all this stuff opening up of these countries, and as if the positive transformation going. Today's world, it's a reverse, especially politically, at least how I feel. And I think like those values should resonate, and it resonates with people who are at least in that part of the world where these threats and everyday warnings are like lit up. And that's how we should align with it, and overall providing tooling and then applying to those circumstances is what's going to get us through and accelerate the belief and the culture.
We're a bit running out of time, but I want to ask one question. We were discussing this with you like before. It's kind of a shame to measure money in privacy, although some solutions like NimVPN would survive for a longer time on that money. Some solutions like Rotkey are surviving basically on retro FPGP or donations or public goods. So money are there to pay the rent, to pay the salary, to maintain core team families and stuff. How would you measure the progress of privacy financially? Because I know, for example, that Railgun is financially sustainable. In my personal opinion, you reached the product market fit with the fees and stuff. Like, how you internally are measuring that we're progressing in what in business world would be called OKRs, KPIs and stuff? What are the key metrics for your progress?
I mean, Railgun is very easy because it's financial system. So, like a lot of other things, we look at total value locked, like how much money is actually in the system. You can gauge how actively used something like Railgun is. We can't see who's transferring to who or how much, but we can see how often does the Railgun system update. So how often does someone interact with it, even if they're interacting privately. So we have very easy ways to see if Railgun is, successful or not, and it's definitely been picking up steam, especially after Vitalik started tweeting about it, which we're very happy about. But I think for right now, for us at Railgun, most of the people who work on it are there for idealistic reasons. Like, sure, we get paid because otherwise, how would we survive in the modern world? But we don't get paid a lot compared to if we went to work for private companies. So I think all of us are there for idealistic reasons, and I think the next thing we are looking at is how much wider adoption can we make. Like, a big thing of what we're doing right now with Railgun is it's this public goods project. So we want everyone to be able to participate and contribute, which hasn't really been that easy in the past. So those are the kind of the success metrics that are in my mind, is how many people can we get involved that are not part of the core contributor group, and how many places can we put Railgun, so not just for the success of the project, but because it's like the one protocol we ourselves believe in. So can we make it more usable in, for example, transferring to and from exchanges or purchasing goods or that kind of stuff?
Think of how success would look like on a network level.
Well, as I said, NIM is incentivized. The operators are supposed to be getting rewards. So the success there is obviously when the user base will be big enough so the operators are happy to be, running the infrastructure. That's simple as, and you can afford development and all these things. Thankfully, I'm not in that part of business. I'm working on the technical side and with the people. And for me, while it's a day-to-day thing to do, it's also motivated by mission, what NIM does. So are we going to be able, through a lot of the things which had been said in this panel and in similar interesting discussions going around, not only Web3, but also, are we going to be able to actually bring an alternative which can be a proposal for people to move away from a fully surveillance layer of basically anything on the internet, be that mono transactions or just very basic things, or not? And if we figure out how to make that offer culturally, especially, so the people will start to go that extra step, the step from the frozen lasagna in your microwave all the way into getting things straight from land, cooking them yourself and knowing what you're eating, and be so happy about it that you invite the whole community for that. If we succeed in that step, that's for me a point of success. And that, of course, in an incentivized system will also mean that the operators will be happy running the infra all around the world.
Mario, from Ethereum perspective, how success would look like in terms of privacy?
I mean, I like what was said here from the financial perspective, the sustainability, right? It needs to be something that's sustainable, but I mean, how we measure privacy is the unknown set, right? How many people I'm actually mixing with, how many users there are. So I think we need to achieve from both sustainability perspective and like to have enough anonymity, we need to achieve number of users who are using these solutions that's enough to cover your tracks, to enough anon set to mix with. At the same time, the liquidity, so like, you know, if there is only 10 users, it's kind of easy to find them. It's different if there's 100 users, but what if, you know, 90% of the liquidity there is like single North Korean hacker or something, right? So yeah, the anon set and the sustainability from the perspective that it's something that's secure, that's as Railgun here maybe is able to fund back its development from the fees or from just the community recognition that there are people who use this, they want to support it back. And again, this is something from, we didn't invent this in crypto, like some Linux distributions or Android distributions that have so many users that they actually care about this working, even if it's not a business, they contribute back, right? So yeah, the public goods survival and enough users to what is the escape velocity, right? I guess, right? So we are this far that we just can go back. That's the goal.
Lasha, you know how to calculate money in a good sense.
Yeah, but like privacy, I'm gonna answer more like philosophically. So privacy is like democracy. You can't like quantify, you can't like measure. It's more like an enabler that enables the different interactions and like free people to build on top of it, and that's what gets like its own monetization, like business models and etc. So same is for me the privacy. So when we measure, it's like what type of new interactions did we unlock? Is it like a anonymous voting or like this kind of digital protest or like account recovery without depending on anything else? So this is my primary measurement. So what are the new interactions and new frontiers that get unlocked by this primitives and the tooling that we provided, and on top of that, of course, the KPIs in terms of the users, in terms of this willingness to pay and all this like monetization will happen. And maybe once you have this ecosystem, then we'll figure out how to fund these very fundamental toolings of privacy and making them like long-lasting and self-sustainable, like with a democracy, you know, you need to always cater it, and it's been like 200 years, and we're still like trying to figure out how to extend it and how to spread it all around the world. So be ready. It's gonna be maybe even harder for privacy to take over the world, but I hope that will let happen.
Question, do we have a time for one more round?
We are way over time, man.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
We will soon not have people for another question.
Thanks everyone, but as a side note, just want to say that we mentioned freedom, we mentioned revolution, we mentioned democracy, and privacy can be that light towards original decentralization ethos. Thanks everyone for participating.
Thanks, Mykola.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for the great panel. I think it's a very complex topic, and all your insights were very interesting. This was the last session today. Thank you so much for joining, and see you tomorrow.